Good morning or good afternoon now. Uh, thank you for the extremely kind introduction. What I'll try and do is quickly just run you through our journey with trying to be teachers. And I say trying to be teachers because it's an incredibly hard job. Um, and I maintain it's probably the hardest job I've ever had. Um, so I teach, as Tuti said, kids math and science. And I think my own journey with math and science has been a little bit of a rocky one because, so to give you a quick sort of glimpse of my life experience, right? So I was a good kid, so I went to good schools, I did really well there. I went to IIT, and then I did all the things that my mom wanted me to, right? So I took up a nice job, went and worked with the UN, then went to Harvard Business School. I was fortunate to be on the sort of founding team of two startups in the Valley, and then we started Avanti. And I think when we started, the assumption we made was, and funnily so, that teaching kids math and science shouldn't be that hard, right? How hard can this be? And I think much of the last 4 years has been a journey in learning how difficult it is to manage kids in class. But also, as we said, really in also understanding how, where technology can help and where technology cannot help. So hopefully, by the end of my talk, I can, give you guys some ideas, and also sort of provide context on where we really deeply believe technology can be an enabler. So, I'm sure through the course of the conference, and as is with every education conference, we've talked a lot about what's broken with the education system, but I think I'm a lot more about what we can do to fix it. But I think in working with 4 governments, and very widely across the country, I think my fundamental conclusion on what's most challenging about education, especially in India, is that we expect teachers to be superheroes, right? I think this is really, really true. There is probably no other profession on this planet today which requires someone to be a child psychologist, wonderfully engaging, almost a theater artist, right? If most of you who've tried to teach classrooms of more than 20 children realize that it's more theater often than it is actually teaching, because you have to hold the attention of 20 people who don't want to be there. So they have to be theater artists, they have to be psychologists, they really have to also be subject experts, because they somehow have to know answers to every question that every kind of kid asks, whether it's the weakest kid in class or the smartest kid in class. And this is really a hard job, right? I worked a lot in healthcare before, and I think if you look at what physicians have to do now, they're super specialized. If you look at cardiologists, many of them, the only thing they can do is replace a heart valve. That's all they do, day in and day out, and do 500 times, just do that 500 times a year, and they make their money. So, I think it's very important to recognize that technology and much of progress, as we've made human progress, we really haven't made the job of the teacher easier. In fact, it's gotten increasingly complicated. And as a consequence, what tends to happen is things get divided very, very clearly between experienced great teachers and inexperienced not great teachers, and it's very, very fuzzy on who's a good teacher. So, so the question really is, and I think this is where technology can play a big role, is in solving this problem, right? I think the way I always phrase this is, if we can find a way for our teachers not to be Superman, I think we'll start to make significant strides in doing a few things. One is making education more consistent for more children, making it more accessible to more children, and in general, making it more fun for more children and for more teachers, because their jobs get more defined. So, about 4 years ago, as you saw in the short video, we started in what I really believe is a little bit of an experiment, right? So Avanti's goal is really to try and get high quality math and science education to as many kids as is possible. And as a consequence, we work largely, I think, in tier 3, tier 4 towns, where it's very, very hard to find faculty or teachers. So we had a bunch of kids who we were sending at the time to some of the most premium coaching institutes in the country, right? So we were paying for them to go. We had great partners who were teaching them for free. And at the same time, we had all these kids in really small towns, and we didn't really know how to teach them, because we couldn't find teachers to go there. And all we had was some engineering colleges nearby where we could get volunteers to go and help work with these kids. So this is the experiment we kind of started, and then and the first thing we tried And I'm sure this is an experience that many of you have had, right? The first thing we tried was, why don't we just make them watch videos and everything will be lovely? Right? There's this common, and I call it a misconception because if you look at the data, it's against it. There's a common, belief that, X is a good teacher, why don't we just record this teacher, play it in the classroom, and all these kids will magically learn. There's a few things which most scientific data says about this. Firstly, when you do that, most kids fall asleep. Secondly, the persistence rate when watching videos without a person in the classroom is abysmally low. It's really, really low, right? In our own classroom, and to give you context, these are Navodaya Vidyalaya kids in a village near Pondicherry who are very, very motivated. These are the most motivated kids you can imagine, right? Even these kids, after about a week of using an online product, stopped using it. They just completely stopped using it. And this is a problem which Coursera, if you know of the MOOCs or these large online courses have had, this is a problem that almost every single pure online, pure tech product has had. So the kids just stop using it after a point because there's nothing to make them persist. So we kind of gave up on it, right? And we told these kids, the only thing I can imagine that you can do, given we cannot get you a teacher in Pondicherry, and you refuse to watch this online stuff, is why don't you just sit in groups of 6 or 7 and study, right? We will just lock you in this room for 4 hours a day and we'd ask you to do group study. And quite shockingly, I'll show you a graph and explain it in a second. This is kind of what we found, right? When we started comparing the learning gains of these children who were only doing self-study and group study, and these were very, very bright kids, with other equally bright kids who we were sending to classrooms, we found 2 things which were quite surprising to us. I think the first was the class moved forward much more closely than when we had a conventional lecture-based classroom, right? Because the kids, because they were working closely with each other and collaborating with each other, tended to move together as a class, right? There are, of course, kids who did very well and very badly, but it was much smaller than typical classrooms. The other was, in this specific case, their performance was actually a lot better than the kids we sent to more conventional, even premium coaching classes across the country. And this was very, very confusing data for us, right? Because what this was telling us at that point in time was that student self-study was outperforming what was happening to these kids in very expensive classrooms. And if you dig a layer deeper into it, right, goes back to my picture of Spider-Man. Because when we started going back to our kids who were in very, very expensive classrooms and started asking them what's happening, right, we found that there was clearly 2 categories of kids. There was a small number of kids, even out of our pool of students, who had gotten placed in what typically get called founders batches or topper batches or pull-out batches or something of the sort, where they were the most experienced and the best, the best qualified teachers teaching them. And they did well, because these were small classrooms with very experienced teachers. Every kid who got placed outside of these classrooms was actually progressively getting worse, right? So if you look at the white curve, you'll find it's, the toppers on that curve are actually better than our kids in Pondicherry. Right? These are the kids who are in the very, very small batch, very high quality teacher programs, and there's nothing that can beat that. But what was happening with the other kids was that they were getting progressively worse, because and you'll see these in your own classrooms. Children who don't get access to great teachers but get access to very complicated content tend to slowly start falling off the pace. And as they lose confidence, they learn lesser and lesser and lesser and lesser, right? And I think the reason lies somewhere in terms of how we structure classrooms, right? So if you look at what's happening now, right? There's a lot of you and there's me on a stage, right? And the longer I keep talking, depending on the quality of my voice, you will feel either engaged or sleepy or, but most of you are listening very passively to what I'm saying, right? Even though you may be very, very engaged, this interaction is very much like television, where I'm putting on some format of show with my voice, with gestures I might make and the slides I show you, and you're consuming this, right? And here's a very, very interesting study that I love sharing whenever I talk. So the data I'll show you is from MIT, right? So they fitted about 100 MIT students with electrodermal sensors. So they put little sensors on their skin which measure stimulation, right? So they produce spikes when the kids are very, very active mentally, are very, very aroused, as they say in psychology, and they produce troughs or flat lines when the kids are very passive. So on the next slide, first, just take a look at class, right? You'll see it's very, very flat line. Right? If this was an EKG, you'd be very worried, right? Very, very flat. And then take a look at sleep. You'll find it has areas that are very flat, but it has a lot of spikes, and that's when kids are dreaming, or students are dreaming, or people are dreaming. That's rapid, when you're experiencing REM sleep. So, at the risk of sounding a little flippant, right? What this study largely concluded was kids were often more awake when they were asleep than when they were in class, right? And then if you look at homework, you'll see the kids are this is something they hate doing, but they're very, very stimulated because they have to do work. When you look at lab, they're very, very stimulated. The only thing that's as dormant as the classroom, and this is an MIT classroom, right? It's as dormant as the classroom is television. And there's a fair amount, this is the easiest study to show, but there's a fair amount of research that says, and especially in cognitive science, that says that this format, right, when I am like with one person talking to many people, basically puts your mind to sleep, right? And good teachers, the reason that they become good is because in between this talking, and it's not that this is not useful, right? This is useful for many purposes, but in between this talking, they do things in the classroom that get a vast majority of their students to become active learners, right? They sort of wake them up, they ask them a question, they ask them to think about something. And that's really, really hard to do for most people, right? So, at this point in time, after what we learned in Pondicherry, we started really trying to talk to people who were researching this and say, where do we use technology? How do we teach? Because our problem statement was, how do we teach a kid in a place where I can't get a good teacher to be? And there's a professor at Harvard called Eric Mazur. He's the dean of physics there. And what Eric had found over 20 years of research was that there were very, very simple activities that you could insert in the middle of class that got kids to collaborate more effectively, and also showed that they were demonstrating learning gains, right? That they were showing improved performance on the same topics that he taught them with these activities as opposed to without them.
So, if this was a small audience, I would try and ask questions on what was happening.
Right? So what was happening was very, very simple. This is something Eric does a lot in his classroom, and we started using in ours, where you do this thing called a concept test, right? So let's say I've given you a talk on the MIT study. If I was to pose a question now on the screen where I forced all of you to vote visibly, and then try and convince each other of your point of view, and then vote again, right? So it's a very, very simple dynamic. It's not very complicated. But what it allows one to do is make sure that every student sort of, forms an opinion, discusses it, and then sort of forms another opinion, right or wrong. Two things happen there. One is the kids wake up. They have to do something. The other is they actually engage in active debate on a particular topic, right, or a particular concept. And in science, again, what we found often is that misconceptions or dealing with misconceptions is more important than dealing with concepts, right? So the way we often teach science is, here are 20 concepts, now go use them. What tends to happen, especially with physics, is that most of these concepts are very counterintuitive to the real world, right? The real world kind of looks and appears to work in a way that is not the same as how the laws of physics would make it work. So it's very important for students, especially in math and science, because that's what I deal with more, to address misconceptions. And you can never know what the misconception is until the child actually expresses it, right? So this is just a very quick example of the kinds of things that we do in class, right? We also do activities where we have them build things, we have them work with their hands in the middle of class and in the middle of all of these videos. So the conclusion we started drawing was that if we are to use technology to run classrooms, right, a few things have to happen. One is we should use technology in a way that it does not just simply mimic a traditional classroom, right? In a traditional classroom, there's a lot of things that are happening beyond me delivering a lecture that are leading kids to learning. What it needs to do is replace the parts of an effective classroom that can be replaced with technology and free up the teacher's time to do things that cannot be replaced with technology. So to give you an example of how an Avanti classroom runs. So again, we do not have the ability or the luxury to be able to hire great teachers, right, in most of the places we work. So what we do is the following. The kids come into class, they take a short quiz, they then watch a video, and they don't watch a video for more than 5, 7, 10 minutes. Then they do a series of activities, which are either concept tests, as you saw, or they'll do a group activity where they'll try and play with something or do a small experiment. Or in the simplest of cases, they'll just do some sums, right? So let's do a set of problems and then discuss them with each other. and then they'll watch another video, and then they do the same thing again. And what we found was, compared to most classrooms, this was equally, if not more effective for children. So our classroom is, in common terms, is what is called a blended learning classroom, right? Where we use technology for certain elements, but we use people for the other elements. And I think the question then becomes, and many teachers have asked us this, even many of our teachers ask us, so if you're going to replace what I do in the class with a video and with activities, then what's my utility, right? What do I do as a teacher that's useful? And I think what we continue to stress and what we find is really, really important is when the teacher's role in the class kind of shifts dramatically and shifts from being one of someone who's disseminating information, which is the role of the video, to someone who's actually taking care of each kid individually. So imagine if you actually had to run a classroom where the lesson planning was taken care of, right? The video was already there, the activity was already planned. What would you as a teacher do in class, right? What you would do as a teacher in class is really be like a sports coach, right? You would sort of walk into the classroom, run these things, but as these things are running, because you're not preoccupied with thinking about, how should I phrase this, how should I structure this, how should I teach this, your entire time in class is free to actually look at the kids, right? Which is to look at which kid is actively participating, which kid is sitting quietly in a corner, which group of students is actually working well together, which group of students is not working well together. If a child is struggling with a question, to walk up to them and actually sit with them and say, okay, let me help you solve this, because everybody else is engrossed in the content that you pre-packaged. So what we find, and so to give you just data on what happened, right? The same group of kids in Pondicherry, half of them got into IIT, right? And this is a staggering number, but it's not as staggering because the fact was that these were very bright kids when we started with it, right? But this was as high a success rate as the best coaching classes will achieve with the best batches, right? Consistently, this is what we find, that our learning gains from these sort of blended learning classrooms in the middle of nowhere are at par, if not better, than the best results that anyone has shown, right? In fact, we've even tried this with very, very weak kids. So in the municipal corporation schools of Chennai, where kids only, it's mostly girls that are left in the science programs because the boys have been pulled out of the municipal schools, right? Even where kids are struggling to pass, we've been able to increase sort of pass rates from 20% to about 70, 80% purely by giving kids time to sit and collaborate with each other and work with each other, right? So I think the message I sort of want to leave with all of you is, technology is great. It's not the final answer, by no ways or means, but it's a huge enabler. And I think one good construct in which to think about the role of technology in our classrooms is to really look at our classrooms and say, look, today I'm made to act like Superman in my class, right? And all of my teachers are. But how can I slowly templatize, structure, and take away parts of this role that can be removed with technology, so that my teachers can move from the role of being these all-encompassing superheroes to becoming coaches, right? Where my teachers can move away from having to deal with very, very complex subject matter, designing assignments, grading tests, and all of these things, and focus on the one thing that most good teachers are actually very, very good at, which is working with kids, motivating them, inspiring them, guiding them, giving them structure, helping them plan. These are things that most teachers actually want to do, can do, and do quite well. So I think the role of technology is really in using every tool that's available, whether it's open source videos on Khan Academy, whether it's the open MIT lectures, whether it's content that you can buy, whether it's online testing, whether it's OMR sheets, right? There's so much technology that can strip away tasks that teachers struggle to do, are not going to be able to do consistently, and free their time up for being coaches, guides, mentors to students. And I think so far in all of our work, we're having a great time doing it, and I think it's working quite well and helping us scale. And I'm certain that if we take this approach to our classrooms, technology will really help us solve the problem of 1 million missing teachers in our schools. Thank you.